What happens when a woman the world thinks it already understands suddenly refuses to be misunderstood? Live, under studio lights, with nowhere to hide and no edit button to save the moment. What happens when an old label is dragged back into the present, and the person wearing it finally says, "Enough?" Before we step any further into this moment, if you're drawn to raw, cinematic celebrity stories that pull you inside the tension instead of summarizing it from a distance, subscribe to the Narration Show right now, hit like, and leave a comment. Because these stories don't just unfold on screen, they live in the conversation afterward. The applause inside the View studio is warm, welcoming, almost celebratory. Miley Cyrus walks out with a relaxed wave, a soft smile, dressed simply but confidently. The kind of confidence that comes not from proving anything, but from surviving it. She's not the teenager the world once argued about. She's not the caricature frozen in old headlines. She's older now, quieter in some ways, stronger in others. She takes her seat, crossing her legs, resting her hands lightly on her lap. The audience cheers again. Some smile with nostalgia, others with admiration, a few with curiosity, wondering which version of Miley will show up today. Joy Behar sits across from her, flipping her cue cards, glasses perched low, expression sharp and familiar. This is her domain. The conversation starts smoothly, predictably. Music, growth, healing. Miley speaks openly about finding peace, about learning to listen to herself instead of the noise around her. Her voice is calm, grounded. The audience nods along. Joy smiles. "You've clearly evolved," she says. "You seem very centered." Miley chuckles softly. "I've worked hard to get here." There's sincerity in her words, and for a moment, everything feels safe. Then Joy tilts her head just slightly. "You know," she says casually, "a lot of people still remember you as that wild child phase. Do you think that image ever really leaves?" The shift is subtle, but it's there. Miley's smile tightens, not disappearing, just pausing. Inside her chest, a familiar sensation stirs. Not anger, recognition. She answers carefully. "I think people remember moments," she says. "Not always context." Joy nods, but she doesn't let it go. "But those moments were very loud," she adds. "Very public." A ripple of light laughter floats through the audience. Miley inhales slowly. She's been here before, in interviews, in headlines, in rooms where the past is treated like a permanent address. "They were honest moments," Miley replies, "even if they made people uncomfortable." Joy raises an eyebrow. "Some might say they look like acting out." The words land heavier than intended. Acting out. The phrase carries years of judgment, of dismissal, of reducing complexity to chaos. Miley feels it in her shoulders, the way her body instinctively stiffens. She keeps her voice even. "I was expressing myself," she says. Joy shrugs slightly. "In ways that shock people." There it is. The framing. The reduction. Miley glances briefly toward the audience, then back at Joy. Her fingers still against her knee. The cameras zoom closer, catching the subtle change in her expression. "That's not who I am," Miley says quietly. Joy smiles, half amused. "Well, it was who you were." The air thickens instantly. The audience quiets, sensing something real pushing against the surface. Miley's jaw tightens. Inside her mind, memories flash, being called unstable, reckless, unhinged. Being laughed at instead of listened to. Being frozen in time while everyone else moved forward. "That was a chapter," Miley says more firmly now. "Not my identity." Joy leans back slightly. Public figures don't always get to decide that. Something snaps, not violently, but decisively. Miley leans forward, elbows resting lightly on her thighs. Her voice remains calm, but it carries weight now. "With respect," she says, "I get to decide who I am." The audience breaks into applause, louder than expected. Joy blinks, surprised. She laughs softly, trying to keep the tone light. People have memories. Miley nods. And media keeps them alive. The laughter fades. The room feels smaller. Joy straightens. "Are you saying interviews like this are unfair?" Miley meets her gaze. "I'm saying they shape narratives." Joy's expression hardens just a touch. "That comes with fame." Miley shakes her head slowly. "No, that comes with not letting people grow." A few gasps scatter through the audience. One of the co-hosts shifts in her seat, glancing between them. Joy presses her lips together, then speaks. "You chose to be provocative." Miley's eyes flash, not with anger, but frustration held back too long. "I chose to be honest." Joy lifts her hands slightly. And honesty invites criticism. Miley's voice rises just a fraction, not louder but clearer. Criticism is fine. Reduction isn't. The tension is unmistakable now. This is no longer playful debate. This is personal history colliding with present identity. Miley feels her heart pounding, but she doesn't retreat. She's tired of shrinking moments like this into jokes. For years, she continues, I was spoken about instead of listened to. Joy interjects, but you were everywhere. Exactly, Miley says. And no one asked why. Silence falls. Heavy. Uncomfortable. The kind of silence television hates. Joy leans forward again. You don't think you leaned into it? Miley exhales sharply. I leaned into survival. The audience reacts, applause mixed with murmurs. Miley's voice trembles just slightly now, emotion creeping in despite her control. I was figuring myself out in public, she says. And people treated it like entertainment. Joy studies her, frowning. But accountability matters. Miley nods. So does empathy. The cameras capture Joy's pause. She wasn't expecting this depth, this resistance. I think you're being defensive, she says. Miley's response comes instantly. I'm being defined. The audience gasps. One co-host opens her mouth, then closes it again. Joy's smile fades completely. That's not my intention. But it's the impact, Miley says. The words hang in the air like a challenge. Impact, not intention. Miley sits back slightly, hands clasped now, grounding herself. She feels exposed, but also steady. For once, she isn't trying to soften the truth. Joy exhales audibly. So what do you want people to see now? Miley doesn't hesitate. Who I am today. Joy tilts her head. And who is that? Miley looks out at the audience, then back to Joy. Her voice is quiet, but unwavering. A woman who survived being misunderstood. Applause fills the studio, strong, sustained. Joy blinks, visibly recalibrating. She forces a smile. All right, she says lightly. We're going to take a quick break. But the break doesn't break anything. As the cameras cut to commercial, the energy remains charged. Audience members whisper to each other. Phones are already out, fingers typing, clips being bookmarked in real time. Miley sits still, breathing slowly, eyes down for a moment, reminding herself she didn't come here to perform. She came to speak. Joy flips her cue cards, jaw tight, expression thoughtful now instead of amused. This wasn't the easy conversation she expected. This wasn't the nostalgic reflection she planned. When the cameras come back on, both women sit poised, but something fundamental has changed. The confrontation has only just begun. The cameras return from commercial, but the atmosphere hasn't reset. If anything, it feels heavier now, like the room itself remembers what was said and refuses to move on. The applause that greets them is louder than usual, uneven, charged with opinion. Miley Cyrus sits upright on the couch, hands folded loosely in her lap, her expression calm but alert. Across from her, Joy Behar straightens her notes, then sets them aside, as if instinctively realizing this conversation can no longer be steered by cue cards. Joy clears her throat, offering a half-smile meant to soften the tension. All right, she says lightly. Let's take a breath. A few audience members laugh, but it doesn't land. The laughter fades quickly, swallowed by the unresolved energy hanging in the air. Miley nods politely, but her eyes remain focused. She knows what just happened won't be smoothed over with a reset button. Joy resumes, her tone measured now, less playful than before. Miley, no one denies you've grown, she says. But public personas don't disappear just because time passes. Miley tilts her head slightly. I'm not asking them to disappear, she replies. I'm asking them not to define me. Joy gestures with one hand. But you built that image. The phrase hits like a spark to dry kindling. Miley inhales slowly, choosing control over impulse. I explored who I was, she says. That's not the same as building a cage. A murmur ripples through the audience. Joy frowns slightly. A cage? Yes, Miley says. Because once you label someone, everything they do gets interpreted through that label. Joy leans forward. That's the price of fame. Miley's voice tightens. That's the excuse used to stop listening. The audience reacts instantly, applause, gasps, a few scattered cheers. Joy pauses, eyes narrowing not in anger but concentration. She studies Miley, clearly reassessing her approach. You shocked people, Joy says after a moment. You challenged norms. You can't pretend that didn't happen. I don't, Miley replies. I just refuse to be punished for it forever. The studio goes quiet. Miley's words hang in the air, heavy with truth. She feels her chest tighten, emotion pushing at the edges of her composure. This isn't theoretical anymore, it's personal history. Joy crosses her arms loosely. Some would say accountability matters. Miley nods. It does. And I took it. Joy raises an eyebrow. How? By growing, Miley answers. By healing. By staying alive through it. The audience exhales collectively, as if struck by the blunt honesty. Joy opens her mouth to respond, then closes it, shifting slightly in her chair. You talk about being misunderstood, Joy says carefully. But millions of young people were watching you. Miley meets her gaze. And millions of young people saw me survive. Joy's lips press together. Or spiral. The word lands hard. Spiral. Miley feels it like a punch to the gut, not because it's new, but because it's familiar. She leans forward, elbows resting on her thighs, voice steady but charged. That word, she says, is why I'm sitting here like this right now. Joy blinks. What do you mean? It turns a human experience into a spectacle, Miley replies. It erases context. It removes compassion. The audience reacts again, this time quieter, more reflective. Joy glances briefly toward the crowd, then back at Miley. I think you're taking this very personally, Joy says. Miley lets out a short, humorless laugh. Because it is personal. The clash sharpens. Joy straightens. I'm doing my job. And I'm telling my truth, Miley fires back. Gasps ripple through the studio. One co-host shifts uncomfortably, eyes darting between them. Joy's expression hardens. You think interviewers shouldn't challenge celebrities? Miley shakes her head. I think you should challenge power, not identity. Joy frowns. That's a convenient distinction. Miley's eyes flash. It's an essential one. The room feels electric. Producers shuffle behind the cameras. A stage manager glances nervously at the clock. This conversation has veered far from the planned segment. Joy exhales sharply. So you're saying the media failed you? Miley doesn't hesitate. I'm saying it used me. The audience gasps. Applause follows, louder now, more unified. Joy's jaw tightens. That's a strong accusation. So was the narrative, Miley replies. Her voice trembles slightly now, not from fear, but emotion pushing through years of restraint. I was called unstable instead of overwhelmed, reckless instead of lost. Joy's tone softens just a fraction. You had resources. Miley nods, and still nearly broke. The silence that follows is profound. Joy looks at her, really looks, for the first time without interruption. The audience is completely still. After a long beat, Joy speaks again. Do you regret any of it? Miley thinks. I regret believing I had to earn empathy. A few audience members audibly inhale. Joy shifts in her seat. That wasn't my intention. Miley's reply is immediate. But it was the impact. The phrase returns, heavier this time. Impact over intention. Joy presses her lips together, then sighs. Maybe we're talking past each other. Miley nods slowly. Maybe. But at least we're finally talking. The tension doesn't vanish, it transforms. The sharpness dulls, replaced by something raw and unsettled. Joy leans back, uncrossing her arms. I hear you, she says, though the words sound careful, measured. Miley exhales, shoulders dropping just slightly. That's all I wanted. Applause breaks out again, sustained, heartfelt. Miley blinks rapidly, emotion cresting dangerously close to tears. She looks down briefly, gathering herself, then looks back up, composed but exposed. A co-host gently interjects, attempting to pivot the conversation toward Miley's latest project. Miley answers professionally, but the emotional undercurrent remains. Every word now carries the weight of what came before. Joy listens without interrupting this time. When Miley finishes, Joy nods once. The clash hasn't ended. It's deepened, transformed from confrontation into something more complicated and harder to dismiss. And as the segment edges forward, one truth is undeniable. This moment is no longer contained within the studio walls. Somewhere beyond them, clips are already being shared, reactions forming, lines being drawn. The conversation doesn't snap back into place after part 2. It lingers, stretched thin, like a wire pulled too tight to ever fully relax again. Even as the co-host attempts to guide the show forward, the studio feels altered, as if everyone inside knows they've crossed into territory that daytime television rarely dares to stay in for long. Miley Cyrus sits back against the couch, posture composed, but her body tells a different story. Her shoulders rise and fall more noticeably now. Her hands, folded together, pressed tighter than before. She said something true, something irreversible, and there's a strange mix of relief and vulnerability in having done it out loud. Joy Behar glances down at the table, then back up, listening more than she has since the interview began. The audience senses the shift. They aren't leaning forward for drama anymore. They're leaning in for understanding. One of the co-hosts speaks gently, trying to soften the moment. Miley, you've talked a lot about growth, she says. Do you feel like the public ever allows that? Miley considers the question carefully. Sometimes, she answers, but usually only when it's convenient. Joy nods slowly. That's fair, she says, surprising a few people in the audience. Miley turns to her. There's no edge in her voice now, just exhaustion. It's easier to freeze someone in time, she continues. It's safer. You don't have to update your understanding. Joy exhales. You know, she says, I've been doing interviews for decades. People come on with armor, some thicker than others. Miley gives a small, knowing smile. Armor doesn't mean you're not wounded. That line lands softly but powerfully. The audience reacts with a low murmur, the kind that comes from recognition rather than shock. Joy shifts in her chair, uncrossing her legs, her posture opening in a way it hadn't before. I don't doubt your pain, Joy says, carefully choosing her words. But when you're famous, your story becomes public property. Miley shakes her head slowly. No, she says. My work is public. My humanity isn't. Silence settles again. Not hostile. Reflective. Miley feels her throat tighten. She hadn't planned to go this far, to open this door so wide. But once it's open, she can't pretend it's not there. I learned early on, she says, that being loud made people uncomfortable, and being quiet made me invisible. Joy watches her closely. So what did you choose? Miley's answer comes without hesitation. I chose to survive. The word hangs in the air, heavier than before. Survival. Not rebellion. Not attention. Survival. The audience's applause is softer now, slower, but deeper. Joy nods once, absorbing it. You know, Joy says after a moment, when people criticize, they think they're holding you accountable. Miley meets her gaze. But accountability without compassion is punishment. Joy tilts her head, considering. That may be true. A few audience members whisper to each other. This isn't the exchange they expected when the show began. There's no clear winner, no sharp punchline. Just two women circling something uncomfortable and real. Joy leans forward slightly. Do you ever worry, she asks, that moments like this get turned into sound bites instead of conversations? Miley lets out a small breath of laughter. All the time. Then why risk it? Joy asks. Miley looks out at the audience. She sees faces, young, older, attentive, moved. She sees herself reflected back in fragments. Because someone out there is watching, she says quietly, and thinking they're broken because they don't fit the version people expect. The audience responds instantly, applause rolling through the studio like a wave. Miley blinks rapidly, emotion threatening to spill over. She presses her lips together, steadying herself. Joy's voice softens. That wasn't something I considered, she admits. Miley turns back to her. That's why I spoke. The co-hosts exchange glances. One nods subtly. Another places her hand on the table, grounding herself. The energy in the room is no longer confrontational. It's raw, exposed. Joy sighs, rubbing her hands together briefly. I won't pretend I understand everything you've been through, she says. But I can hear that you're tired of being reduced. Miley nods. That's all I've been saying. The moment stretches. No one rushes to fill the space. For once, silence feels appropriate. A producer's voice whispers urgently from off-camera, reminding them of time. The show needs to move on. The schedule doesn't care about emotional breakthroughs. One of the co-hosts gently pivots toward Miley's current music, her latest work, the evolution in her sound. Miley answers, professional and composed, but something has shifted. Her voice carries a softness now, as if the confrontation has stripped away a layer of defense. She speaks about creativity, about peace, about choosing herself. Joy listens without interrupting. She nods at appropriate moments. The earlier edge is gone, replaced by something closer to contemplation. When Miley finishes, Joy speaks again. I may challenge, she says slowly, but I don't intend to erase who you are. Miley meets her eyes. Intent matters, she says, but impact matters more. Joy gives a small nod. Point taken. The audience applauds, longer this time, not eruptive but sincere. A few people stand. Miley notices, her chest tightening with gratitude and disbelief. As the segment draws to a close, smiles return, but they feel different now. Less performative. More human. The cameras capture the final moments, then fade out. When the lights dim and the red recording signal disappears, the room exhales. Crew members relax. Producers step forward. Conversations break out in hushed tones. Miley stands slowly, legs slightly unsteady. A staff member offers her water. She accepts it with a quiet thank you, taking a sip, grounding herself. Her heart is still racing, but beneath it is a strange calm. Across the set, Joy remains seated for a moment longer than usual. She stares at the table, replaying the exchange in her mind. The words, the pauses, the lines that shifted the room. A co-host murmurs something to her. Joy nods, thoughtful. For a brief moment, Miley and Joy's eyes meet off camera. There's no hostility there now, just shared awareness. They both know something unscripted happened, something neither of them fully controlled. Miley walks toward the hallway, away from the lights and applause. As she moves, fragments of the conversation echo in her mind. Acting out, survival, impact, identity. She wonders how it will be edited, how it will be framed, how it will be judged. Then she remembers the audience, the applause that felt like understanding, not spectacle. The faces that looked relieved, not entertained. Behind her, the studio resets for the next segment. Chairs are adjusted. Notes are shuffled. Television moves on, as it always does. But this moment won't. Somewhere outside the studio walls, clips are already circulating. Captions are being written. Opinions are forming. What began as an interview has become something larger. A mirror held up to how stories are told, and who gets to tell them. And as the show continues, one truth is already clear. Whatever happens next, this conversation is no longer contained. The aftermath is waiting. The moment doesn't end when the cameras shut off. In many ways, that's when it truly begins. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, clips start appearing online. First shaky phone recordings from the audience, then clean studio cuts ripped straight from the feed. The same line appears again and again in bold captions, frozen in all caps across social media. That's not who I am. It spreads faster than anyone in that studio could have predicted. People replay the moment where Miley leans forward. They slow it down. They analyze her expression, the tightening of her jaw, the steadiness in her voice. Some call it brave. Some call it overdue. Others accuse her of being defensive, dramatic, ungrateful. The internet does what it always does. It divides. Miley Cyrus sits in a quiet car later that day, city lights streaking past the window. Her phone buzzes nonstop in her hand. She doesn't open every notification. She already knows what's inside, praise tangled with criticism, support colliding with dismissal. She's lived this cycle before, but this time feels different. Heavier. More honest. She scrolls slowly. One message stops her. I was judged the same way. Thank you for saying something. Another follows. I finally felt seen. Her chest tightens. This is why she spoke. Not for headlines. Not for applause. For moments like this, quiet acknowledgments from people who felt erased by narratives they didn't choose. Across town, Joy Behar watches the same clips from a different perspective. She's seen herself go viral before. She survived backlash, praise, outrage cycles that burn hot and disappear. But this one lingers. It doesn't feel performative. It feels personal. She watches the exchange again, this time without the pressure of live television. She notices the pause she didn't register before. The way Miley's tone shifted from controlled to resolute. The audience reaction that changed the room. Joy exhales slowly, leaning back in her chair. The next morning, the studio feels different. The audience arrives buzzing, already aware they're stepping into the aftermath of something that struck a nerve. Joy opens the show with her usual confidence, but there's a subtle difference. Longer pauses, more careful phrasing. She doesn't apologize. She doesn't double down either. Instead, she speaks about conversations, about discomfort, about how dialogue isn't always neat. Viewers dissect her words frame by frame, arguing over what she meant, what she didn't say, what she should have said. Media outlets jump in fast. Headlines frame the moment as a clash, a shutdown, a fiery takedown. Others call it a reckoning. Think pieces appear analyzing gender, fame, identity, and the price of growing up in public. The moment becomes symbolic, larger than either woman intended. Miley remains mostly silent. No rant. No thread. Just a single, carefully chosen message posted later that evening. She thanks people for listening. She talks about growth, about allowing people to evolve. She doesn't mention Joy by name. She doesn't fan the flames. That restraint changes the tone of the conversation. Instead of escalating, it deepens. Fans defend her not with insults, but with stories, sharing their own experiences of being trapped in old versions of themselves, of being judged by moments instead of journeys. Weeks pass, but the clip doesn't disappear. It resurfaces in discussions about media responsibility, about how young women are framed, about the difference between accountability and cruelty. It's shared in classrooms, podcasts, late-night conversations. For Miley, the moment becomes a quiet turning point. Not because it rebrands her, but because it reinforces something she already knows. She doesn't have to explain herself anymore. She's already lived through the worst versions people projected onto her and survived. In later interviews, when she's asked about that day, she answers calmly. "I wasn't angry," she says. "I was clear." She doesn't revisit the argument. She doesn't relive the tension. She lets the moment stand on its own. Joy continues on as she always has, sharp, outspoken, unapologetic. But longtime viewers notice something subtle. She interrupts less. She listens a beat longer. Whether intentional or not, the exchange leaves its mark. What made the moment unforgettable wasn't raised voices or insults. It wasn't a viral outburst or a meltdown. It was a boundary being drawn in real time. A woman refusing to let an outdated narrative define her any longer. On live television, under unforgiving lights. That's why it lasted. Because so many people recognized themselves in it. Being told who you are instead of being asked. Being trapped by a past you've outgrown. Being expected to apologize for surviving loudly. And now, the story passes to you. Did Miley Cyrus go too far? Or did she finally take control of her own narrative? Was Joy Behar doing her job? Or did she push a question past empathy into reduction? Share your opinion in the comments. Your voice is part of this conversation. And if you want more cinematic, emotional, and explosive stories that take you inside the moment instead of summarizing it afterward, subscribe to The Narration Show, like this video, and share it with someone who understands what it means to be misunderstood. Because the most powerful clashes aren't always the loudest. Sometimes they're the ones where someone finally says, "That's not who I am."